Here's a question. What defining factor do these two movies share in common? No, it's not that they're both made by the man who don't miss, King Chris Nolan, nor is it that they're both about motivated men following their obsessions through to horrifying conclusions. You'd be right on either account, but I see a far more interesting kinship between them.
Every magic trick consists of 3 parts.
In The Prestige, we witness an ever-escalating duel between rival magicians in pursuit of the greatest magic trick the world has ever seen. It's a story that, on its own, is nothing short of riveting, enchanting even, but the story alone ain't where the magic happens, so to speak. The power of The Prestige, the part that makes every first-time viewer say, "Holy shit, let me run that back right now," is the way it embodies the design of a magic trick, a great illusion, a sleight of hand so clever you'll never see it coming. It's a film in which the design, or the form, entirely embodies the function. The Prestige itself is a magic trick. Oppenheimer achieves this too, but not through magic. No, in a film that endeavours to map the mind of the man who envisioned and facilitated the creation of nuclear weapons for America during World War II, King Chris, that mad genius, managed to make a movie in the form of a fission chain reaction. Now, I'm no nuclear physicist, so I'm not going to try to explain fission academically. Even the movie itself knows that is a hard intellectual sell. All that matters here is the result of the process sees a neutron collide with an atom of, say, uranium-235, causing the atom to split and send more neutrons to collide with more atoms, and so on and so forth, giving us an ongoing reaction, with each split releasing the energy that was used to bind the original atom together. That's where the explosive part comes in. And I know, I see what you're thinking. How can a movie embody that? Storylines. Yes, storylines. The journey of a character from here to there. But I'm not talking just one journey or the journey of just one character. Storylines. Consider Dunkirk, the movie I still believe to be King Chris's crowning achievement. It takes on a triptych structure following the trials of 1, 2, and 3. Land, sea, and air. 3 sets of characters, 3 distinct storylines, A, B, and C. A, the most present, B second, C third, hence 1 week, 1 day, 1 hour. Literally every movie follows this structure to some degree. There's the plot, and then there's subplots. You have your focus story, your side story, and your background story, and together they kind of synergize into one harmonic whole.
No, I am your father.
With Oppenheimer though, Nolan takes this structure to the extreme. Right from the outset, the film is split in 2. 2 characters, 2 perspectives, 2 specific points in time from which those perspectives will be recounted. J. Robert Oppenheimer, 1954, Q clearance renewal hearing, and Lewis Strauss, 1959, Senate confirmation hearing for the US Cabinet position of Secretary of Commerce. Fission and fusion, color and monochrome, story A and story B.
The so-called derogatory information in your indictment of me cannot be fairly understood except in the context of my life.
It's from this vantage point, this point in time, a decisive point of consequence in both men's lives, that they will be asked to recount the actions and events that led them there. These first moments in either storyline act as contracts written and signed by Nolan himself, dictating that we will meet these moments once more after returning to their point of origin, their inception, that first raindrop on the water. What we're looking for here is the inciting incident, the fuel, the cinematic uranium-235. In screenwriting terms, the inciting incident is the event or action that generates the story our protagonist will move through. Think the Joker stealing the mob's money in The Dark Knight, or Sato's offer from Inception.
Assemble a team, Mr. Khan, and choose your people more wisely.
Now, sure, the obvious inciting incident for Oppenheimer would be Colonel Groves asking Robert to lead the Manhattan Project, but that doesn't go down until over a quarter of the way into a 3-hour movie. The story has been rolling for 45 minutes by now, which tells me that while building the bomb may be what defined this man, it is not what defines his story. It's not what drives him. Biopics tend to forego the more traditional inciting incidents in favour of initialising our insight into the subject's life at a point of inspiration, choosing less to define the story than to define the character, often through an intimate, small-scale moment that will go on to frame the arc that follows. Something they do, something they see, something they hear.
Niels, meet J. Robert Oppenheimer.
In this 80-second scene, Kenneth Branagh, doing Danish and having a damn fun time with it, imparts on Robert 2 ideas that will define his entire future. The first, and more present, is the recommendation to leave Cambridge and study theory in Germany under Max Born. While somewhat vague and indirect, it remains the catalyst to the life Robert will lead, as it encourages him to pursue that which only he can see with ardent fervour. It encourages him to pursue his vision, or perhaps his impulse, down whatever road it might take him. Before that, however, is another concept, one intended to temper the pursuit of present ideas.
You can lift the stone without being ready for the snake that's revealed.
Herein lies the thematic catalyst of Oppenheimer, the idea of causality, of consequence. Any action will have a reaction, and that reaction mightn't always be one we can anticipate. That very notion is captured within this very scene, within the consequence of a poisoned apple. A vision pursued and acted upon with righteous conviction, without any real thought given to the fallout. The stone and the snake poised ready to strike, with the consequences only sidestepped because the snake was able to be subdued. But not all snakes can be.
Dr. Oppenheimer. An honor.
The inciting incident of Story B is both far simpler and less straightforward. Whereas Robert is tasked with contextualizing his entire life leading up to the security hearing, Louis Strauss is asked only to contextualize his relationship with Robert, thus, in theory, making the inciting incident their first meeting. Here. And for a time, that seems to hold true. The Senate confirmation hearing appears to serve as an alternate perspective on Robert's life through the eyes of a significant force adjacent to him.
You might get caught holding the knife yourself.
Until we later learn that wasn't the case. Not entirely, anyway. As Strauss steps out of the shadows, we learn that his storyline has all along been in service of contextualizing his orchestration of a political witch hunt after Oppenheimer, fueled by a chain of unwitting indiscretions against his character that began right at the head of their first encounter.
It's pronounced Strauss.
From here, Nolan begins to stack slights against Strauss. Small at first,
Louis Strauss was once a lowly shoe salesman.
but increasingly damaging to the pride of a self-made man obsessed with admiration, a mere mortal, by his own words, who desires great minds to deem him their equal.
What did you say to him?
From here, those indiscretions begin to compress, and somewhere along the line, whether it be at the Atomic Energy Commission vote on the export of isotopes to Norway,
Congressman, you could use a shovel in making atomic weapons. In fact, you do.
or the debate over the pursuit of a US hydrogen bomb program,
Robert, they just fired a starting gun.
those compressed indiscretions achieve supercriticality, which is how our storyline chain reaction begins. Let's go. From these 2 points of origin, Oppenheimer undergoes a complicated sprawl as its narrative chain reactions gain momentum through cause and effect.
I'm just not sure you want to go down this road.
Continuing with story B, as the considerably less demanding of the two, we watch as Strauss consolidates his vision of Oppenheimer as the antagonist opposing him at every turn, denigrating him, dismissing him, until finally he's left no choice but to remove Robert from the equation altogether.
We need a systematic destruction of Oppenheimer's credibility so he can never again speak on matters of national security.
And Strauss gets what he wants. Flash forward a few months and Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer, father of the atomic bomb, is denied renewal on his Q clearance, thus destroying his credibility regarding national security in the court of political opinion. We have cause and effect.
This is just how the game is played.
But, as causality goes, an effect in itself may split off to become a new cause entirely. Strauss never anticipated that his not-so-covert takedown of Oppenheimer would turn the scientific community at large against him, or that their rejection would trigger his downfall before the Senate, as surprise Rami Malek is deployed to irredeemably roast his ass on the record.
I'm denied. Yeah.
It might be a linear chain, but it's a chain nonetheless. This becomes this, which becomes this, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, Story A initiates a reaction that is far more unstable, where Story B remains locked in a procedural knock-on of cause and effect forced to bottleneck around the trap Strauss unknowingly set for himself. Story A explodes outwards in scope as its storyline continuously splits into smaller and smaller storylines or subplots. Watch this. If Robert's visions lead him further abroad, both geographically and in his studies, then they also lead him further abroad in culture, exciting an interest in revolutionary politics. Communist politics. Drop a pin. Of course, this means Robert finds himself at a number of academic soirees. On the menu tonight, Marx and Margaritas. It's at one such soiree where he meets both French literature professor 𝙤𝙤𝙨𝙨𝙤𝙤 and psychiatry graduate Jean Tatlock, both avid members of the Communist Party USA.
I like my wiggle room too.
Sure you do. Drop a pin and divide again. By now, we're already some 3 divisions down from the point of supercriticality, but the reaction doesn't cease there.
I told you, Robert, no more fucking flowers.
Out here, within the subplot to a subplot, King Chris facilitates yet another split, generating 2 or more instances of identical words or actions that ricochet along the timeline.
At least you didn't bring me flowers.
See? Or how about this?
Theory will get you only so far. Theory will take you only so far.
Theory will take you only so far. What do you want for theory alone?
It's relentless, creating these reverberations at such a pace that there's barely a scene without a sister from less than 35 minutes through. The reaction has become entirely self-sustaining, using the fuel provided from its first few scenes to generate a positive feedback loop of narrative, where, essentially, everything already in play by the time Groves gives that fateful offer to Robert sustains the 2+ hours of story still to go.
Build him a town. Fast.
By this point, and by all means, Oppenheimer has already embodied that fission reaction in the very fabric of its storytelling. 2 characters see 2 concepts reach supercriticality and become the inciting incidents of their stories, where this leads to this, which leads to this, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't really go far enough. Not for a Nolan movie. You see, a lesser filmmaker might have stopped there. A lesser filmmaker might have found a way to manifest a nuclear chain reaction within the very framework of their movie, right from the script stage, on the page, but cinema doesn't stop at story. Story alone might let you see that chain reaction play out, but it won't make you feel it, and Nolan knows that. There's still two more factors you've got to facilitate to make that atomic embodiment absolute: sound and speed. You don't need to be Einstein to understand the first. Oppenheimer gets loud. Really loud, but sheer volume ain't the main event of Oppenheimer's soundscape. No, once again, it's storylines, but this time, they're in the score itself. In the same way that Oppenheimer's narrative creates a corporeal conversation between cause and effect within its characters' lives, Chris and composer Ludwig Göransson create a conceptual conversation within the film's music, a subtextual play on that same cause and effect using leitmotifs, little musical phrases that can be repeated and reworked in recognizable ways. Just hear me out. What you just heard is the first real noticeable leitmotif in Oppenheimer. It's a slow string descent, sinister and unsettling, that's paired with Robert recounting feelings of angst and unrest in his time at Cambridge. This is the sound of Robert's anxiety. Drop a pin. From this point onwards, anytime that leitmotif is repeated, we're probably gonna feel the anxiety we did back here, and that's where Chris and Ludwig get real clever. By my understanding, this motif is used on 4 more occasions. The next is an outlier, applying it to the first foray into the Los Alamos desert, using the sound of Robert's early feelings of cosmic insignificance to contrast the untamed expanses of backcountry New Mexico, which is still pretty clever. The next 3, however, are something else entirely, and their effect compounds with each new application.
Pash. You met Colonel Pash?
Here, in a scene several reactions down the line from this initial meeting, Robert is grilled by a scarily intense Casey Affleck, politely interrogated about what will later become known as the Chevalier incident. As they speak, that leitmotif resurfaces, surrounding this interaction with Pash in that same anxiety as before. This man is an antagonizing force to Robert, and that collision of the anxious leitmotif and an active threat ricochets our awareness of the motif into new territory, where it becomes a kind of imperial march for villains Strauss and Borden.
I'm sorry it's come to this, Robert. I think it's wrong.
As I said, it's clever, and you can hear it happen over and over again in every facet of the score, like the way All-American Patriot Colonel Groves has his theme reappear after the Trinity test is a success. Ding, play the Patriots theme, or how the score's centerpiece, the sound of possibility of Robert's imagination in full flight, reverberates out across the runtime, procedurally shedding the sounds of string section excitement until only the horns and synths remain to herald the end of the world. To take it even further, because they do, within that recurring theme of Robert's vision, the tempo accelerates from 180 beats per minute at the start to somewhere around 350 by the end. This becomes this, which becomes this. Yeah, they managed to practically embody a rampaging chain reaction inside the individual pieces of score, and they did that by manipulating time. Because that's the final factor in fully realizing a film this way. The Nolan way. Time. The narrative fission reactions occurring after achieving supercriticality accelerate as they cannibalize the fuel laid in place across the first 35 minutes of the movie through self-sustaining storylines, splintering out faster and faster and faster, and then somehow faster again as we're propelled from sequence to sequence, scene to scene, moment to monumental moment. A storyline splits, deviates, collides with another, over and over. A cause will have effect which becomes cause again, exploding off into new storylines altogether. Some macro, some micro, and all of them in conversation as the reaction sprawls outwards with explosive force. Away from the core, away from that first stone being lifted, so that as the entire atmosphere of Oppenheimer ignites and consumes everyone and everything in its path, we can finally, with total and devastating clarity, see in its final 50 seconds, if not across the 6 minutes prior, Oppenheimer reveals itself to be a film about the very nature of consequence. It told us this right from the very start with the very first shot. Raindrops on the water, rippling outwards, colliding, reacting. That's all a chain reaction is, after all, a series of consequences crashing into further consequences, all stemming from one initiating idea. There's something that cannot be stopped once in motion, cannot be put back, cannot be made right again. Consequences are beyond our control, often beyond even our perception. Did we start the chain reaction, or are our actions, our thoughts, our entire existence just a consequence to something that was already in motion long before we arrived here? Cause and effect, effect and cause. The great curse of being human is the way our minds so often will not, and cannot, comprehend what a moment may become to us and to those around us until it has long since passed, and the spark behind how we chose to move in that moment has faded from memory altogether.
Now it's your turn to deal with the consequences of your achievement.
Could Robert have known that his visions of a hidden universe would lead to the deaths of over 220,000 people? Could he have known that they would lead to the death of an ex-lover here at home, or that a few offhanded remarks would create his ultimate adversary? Could Lewis Strauss have known that destroying Robert's credibility would soon incinerate his own? What Christopher Nolan suggests, I think, in the final minutes of Oppenheimer, is that our story cannot be written by us alone. It was written by others before we were born, and will be written and rewritten by others long after we die, and all we can fight for is to say a few solitary phrases about ourselves along the way, as all else we say is inked into the pages of those beside us, and across from us, and potentially those half a world away that might never even know that our story was being written at all. Movies that in conversation with themselves are hard to come by because they require a level of vision that's nigh on impossible to render in reality. But Chris did it. Together with the team around him, he embodied a nuclear chain reaction on every conceivable level of Oppenheimer, creating a kind of filmmaking fission, and that to me feels like a genuine magic trick.